We are in the season of legislation set to just fly all over the place at the Illinois Statehouse. Welcome back, Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. And, doing this on my own time and some big things ahead. Very much looking forward to it. So stay with us and be sure to follow me on X. Just search Bishop on Air. Follow me on YouTube, on Facebook, where we post all kinds of news articles. If you're not familiar, my full-time gig has me at the Center Square, where I am the associate editor for Illinois, and we watch very closely what goes on at the Illinois Statehouse. So I want to appreciate you guys for checking that out as well. And if you haven't already become a subscriber to our email at thecentersquare.com, go join that newsletter. You get regular updates of all the stuff we're working on here in Illinois to keep you informed. But there's tons of stuff that's flying through committees. All right, so we want to try to track this as much as possible. And one in particular deals with libraries. Libraries have been an interesting focus in the past few election cycles, especially in Illinois, where you have a measure that tells local libraries that they have to essentially follow the American Library Association's Bill of Rights for libraries, which includes, prohibiting, banning books for political or other reasons. And a variety of other things, but local libraries, taxing districts, they have to say they agree and adhere to the American Library Association's code, essentially, in order to get pass-through dollars to go to the local library from the Illinois Secretary of State's office. So it's an interesting law that sparked a rather interesting debate about the idea of local control and access to inappropriate material, and how do you balance that, and so on. Well, now there's this measure that's passed the Illinois House Judiciary Criminal Committee that would enhance penalties against individuals who threaten public libraries. What's interesting here is this is being brought forward by a Democrat. And it's Democrats at the State House who have the supermajority, and it's also Democrats at the State House who've been historically opposed to penalty enhancements. So here's State Representative Anstava Murray talking about why she feels that her measure is necessary as it's been brought forward by the Illinois Secretary of State.
Unfortunately, within this past year, we have been seeing an uptick in violence against our libraries. We saw in the 81st District, we had bullet shells delivered to our library after we announced that there was going to be a drag queen bingo for high school students that had to be canceled due to that. And just last year, there were a number of bomb threats that were made against public libraries throughout the state, including the Illinois State Library building just across the street here. Specifically, between the end of July 2023 and September 2023, there were 22 known bomb threats, with multiple libraries responding to multiple threats from would-be domestic terrorists. Libraries had to close their doors while law enforcement cleared the buildings. Law enforcement agencies from the city of Chicago and its suburbs to Springfield spent time and resources sweeping the buildings and ensuring public safety. We should all strive to protect and keep open our state's libraries that serve our most vulnerable populations of children, seniors, and unhoused day to day.
Libraries are crucial. There's no question, right? I mean, it's a great place to go and find some how-to material. It's a wonderful place to get your kids interested in reading and a whole sort of things. And it's a great community meeting place. Full disclosure, I'm married to a librarian. All right, so I understand how important libraries are. But I also, having watched what happens at the State House, see the dynamic of this idea of enhancing penalties, which Democrats have historically been against. But that's what this particular bill does, is it enhances penalties for individuals who are found guilty of threatening libraries, the actual building, librarians, people, or others who work at libraries, other public servants. But Democrats have historically been against this idea of enhancing penalties. There was a bill, and I don't think it advanced, but State Representative at the time, Tony McCombie, who's now the House Republican leader, the House Minority Leader, she has a bill, and I believe there's a companion bill that a Democrat had to enhance penalties against people who go after DCFS employees, because we've had several DCFS employees who've been killed in the line of duty. Some Republicans and others, they were like, hey, we need to enhance penalties against people who do this because this is just abhorrent. But those never advanced. This one from a Democrat, State Representative Stava Murray, to enhance penalties against those who threaten librarians or libraries, even the building, that did advance, but not without some questions. And in particular, State Representative Will Guzzardi, a Democrat from Chicago, he talked about how historically Democrats have been against the idea of enhancing penalties.
You, Rep. Salvamore, know, and I think share this view that the idea of sort of enhancing penalties for certain behaviors as a means to try to deter those behaviors is one that we've been skeptical of, you and I both, over the course of our years in service on this committee. And I want to recognize that the threats that you all are talking about are real, are despicable, have no place in civil society. I think libraries are anchors of the public good and important institutions in our communities.
But Guzzardi went on to, again, explain why they're not necessarily interested, at least some in the Democratic Party, not interested in enhancing penalties or exposing even more people to enhanced penalties. More from Will Guzzardi.
You're not going to catch me defending this kind of behavior. I love my district staff with every ounce of my heart, and anybody who ever says a cross word to them is like on my bad list forever. But I just want to name that we're exposing a lot more people to Class II felony offenses, which we just heard a moment ago, a bill about teachers having sexual relationships with their students, where the penalty is a Class 4 felony. So this is a very serious. The other offenses that have Class 2 felonies attached to them are very serious kinds of offenses. So we're taking this quite seriously, as we should. I just am always cautious that we might expose people to quite serious consequences.
Exactly right. I mean, a Class 4 felony is not as severe as a Class 3 felony, I believe. I believe that it's like DEFCON. The lower the number, the more serious the situation. So, Democrats, again, have not historically been in favor of enhanced penalties. But if you look on the flip side, I guess it depends on what the issue is, right? You look at the gun ban. It's a Class 2 felony if you're caught with a magazine over a certain capacity for a second time. It's a Class 2 felony if you are caught with a firearm that's not registered with state police for the second time. So I guess it depends on the category here. So interesting to see that, right? Some Democrats wanting to enhance penalties for some things, but pushing back on enhancing penalties for others. But then you have this idea of those who have been convicted of 3 felonies never being allowed parole. Well, a measure advancing out of the Statehouse would change that. State Representative Rita Mayfield has a measure that would essentially say that people who do have 3 felony convictions against them can request the Prisoner Review Board for parole. Here she is talking about that particular issue and why she thinks that's a good idea.
That if you commit 3 felonies, you're in prison for life. Well, as you know, we have a lot of aging offenders that are costing taxpayers just millions of dollars. So if somebody doesn't need to be in prison, then we want to make sure that they have a pathway to not be here and to stay, prison should be for individuals who actually should be here, not for those individuals who have just committed crimes out of stupidity or drug usage or mental health or anything like that. So we just want to make sure that we're locking up the right people. So we want to continue to have conversations, which is what we did today. They allowed the bill to come out on second, which basically just means that we're going to allow you to continue having conversations with the state's attorneys to see if you can come to agreement on what the language of the bill actually should be. So that's what we're doing now. It's just still continuing to have these conversations. I know that the state's attorneys are concerned about habitual armed criminals. I think we all should be. Anybody with a gun is a dangerous individual. But we want to look at, did those individuals have mental health issues? What was the cause? Somebody that had severe mental health issues 20 years ago, they didn't have the same resources that we have now.
So obviously that's going to be a measure that continues discussion, but it's advanced. So last week, Friday, was the deadline for bills to advance out of committee. And we saw this time and again, they would advance a bill out of committee and say, well, it's not done yet, we'll amend it and bring it back to committee. But they just haven't had that deadline to get bills out of committee. So interesting to see that measure advance. But you also had conversations about openness and transparency. There's a story we actually talk about with Chicago reporter William Kelly in the next segment about the city and the village of Dalton. Right, a lot of focus has been on Dalton with the mayor there, Tiffany Henyard, scrutiny on her and spending. And Dalton's not the only town where there's a lot of scrutiny, right? You look anywhere across the state of Illinois, there's a lot of scrutiny on local government, as there should be, because it's your tax dollars and how they're used on a most granular level locally, right in your backyard. There should be more scrutiny on that. But sometimes you run into, resistance trying to get information. Look at the taxpayer spending on the migrant situation out of Chicago. $300 million, the city says. Well, is that real? Is there other funding that's coming through, tax dollars going out? Why are there only, 3 major agencies getting the most of the money? Can we see those contracts? So you've got the need for transparency, but if you don't have a open, transparent government and you have a complaint against that, you go to the Illinois Attorney General's office and you file with a public access counselor to try to get some action on that information. Well, the public access counselor is backlogged, and they've got a backlog of 1,200 or something like that. So a lot of backlogged cases for people wanting open government. Recently, during a House hearing, State Representative Amy Ellick asked the Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, about openness in government and the backlog and how they go about getting that cleared. My colleague, Katrina Peterson, talked with Amy Ellick and separately with Attorney General Kwame Raoul about that very situation and how they're going to move forward with clearing out some of those backlogs and whether or not there's an effort to have some goals to clear out the backlog of open government requests.
Well, based on outreach to my office, we have citizens in Madison County that periodically file requests to the Attorney General's office to review Open Meetings Act violations, or they disagree with the contents of a FOIA request that have been returned to them, and those things seem to take a very long time. In fact, a few years ago, I know of one case that took about 3 years to get an answer back from the public access counselor. So the gist of my question was, have you improved? Is it getting better? And what can we expect for backlogs? I definitely think there's a way to implement some sort of standard and goal for your office that, as the Attorney General, he can tell his office, this is what I expect of our work to the public of Illinois. So I definitely recommended and continue to recommend that they set goals for what they want their response period to be, and then make effort to stick to those goals.
Part of the challenge is from year to year, it's impossible to predict how many requests will come in. So it's not a flat number of requests that come in from year to year, yet our staffing level is maintain at a certain level, and sometimes we lose people. And so while we try to have strategic goals throughout our office to improve and to measure and to have accountability, it's not always easy to predict what caseload we will have to deal with in a particular year. And so setting a goal based on an unpredictable number is kind of challenging.
When you do have increased volume, it's especially important to stick to your goals and stick to your guidelines and make sure that you're answering the public in a timely manner and not using an excuse of increased volume to let those responses lag.
And I would imagine, too, if you've got increased numbers of people wanting openness in government, there might be some problems with openness in government. And again, the government's funded by the tax dollars. You pay your taxes. Lord knows that, look at the calendar, it's tax season, right? How many of you spent time over the weekend cranking out your taxes? And if you had any kind of side gig, did you claim all that money? Did you pay the proper taxes on that? Did you have to cut a check for thousands of dollars to the IRS? So, yeah, obviously, knowing more about local government, making sure that there's openness in government, clearly a focus that some have at the Illinois Statehouse. So, listen, they're off today. Both chambers are actually back this week. I believe the Senate comes back tomorrow, and then the House and the Senate come back on Wednesday. It's going to be a very busy week. We will do what we can to keep you updated on stuff that you need to know. There were 150 bills that advanced out of committee last week, and I've got the list. I'm going through them, and we'll do what we can tomorrow to really give you an overview of some of the stuff that is expected to advance to the next chamber at the Illinois General Assembly. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, go over to thecentersquare.com, and be sure to join the newsletter there and subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest. All right, it's Bishop on Air.